What is going on, fellow game developers? My name is Muddy Wolf, and today we're continuing our 2D top-down shooter game, and we're going to add an enemy to actually shoot at. In the last video, we added the ability to shoot, which is great, but the problem is we have nothing to shoot at. So let's just not mess around. Let's just get straight into making our actual enemy. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to create a new script up here, which we are going to set off other node character body 2D. Now I'm going to rename this to enemy, and we are going to add in a collision shape and also our sprite, the actual enemy sprite here, which we'll just drop in. Now for our actual sprite, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for a transform and set this at 0.25, and we're just going to reset its position so it's at 0, 0. We will then rotate him 90 degrees just like we did with our own player's sprite, and then our collision sprite can be a circle, and we'll set the radius something like 16. Yeah, that's his hitbox there, so that'll be how it hits. You could probably do a polygon shape if you wanted to with this. You could create a polygon 2D. You create a polygon shape if you wanted, so it actually matched it perfectly, but I'm just going to stick with the circle. It works pretty well. And I'm just going to rename his actual graphic to GFX just so it's easier for me to reference later on. I then want to add an area 2D to this guy, which is going to be his attack range. Now in here we need another collision shape, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the first collision shape and drop it in there, and we're just going to increase this slightly to give it a sort of closer radius. This is where he will be able to attack from. And let's just move the graphics. Oh, before we do that, we should actually set this back to 16 because we're actually changing both the collision shapes at once. What we need to do is right click and make this one unique, so then you can actually see the difference there. So you can see the smaller one on the inside is our attack range, and the one on the outside is, or the inside here, is our actual shape. We're then going to save our enemy into entities and just hit save in there. On our character body 2D, we want to actually set his type to floating, so he's not actually using any gravity or anything. And then we want to create a new script, which we're going to call enemy.cs. Just capitalize that name, and I'm going to actually just not use a template for this. We're just going to go from the default character by extending the character body here. Let's also move the script to actually be in our scripts directory. Open and hit create. So the first things we're going to need is we're going to need to export some variables. So we are going to export a float called speed and set that to about 250f. We will then export another float, which we are going to call damage, and this is the damage the enemy will do to the player. We then want a float called APS, which is going to be how many attacks he can perform per second, and we'll set this to 2. Then in our ready script, well, actually saying that, up here we need to apply another one called attack speed, and we also need a float with time until attack, which we will set equal to, actually we'll set that in our ready function, and we'll also say within attack range, which will this will be a boolean, which will be set by default to false. We will also need a reference to our player, so we need to get our player, which we will set later to the actual player. Now within ready, what we want to do is set our our attack speed equal to 1 divided by APS. This will give us an attack speed. So for example, 2 should give us 2 per second. We then want to give our time until attack equal to attack speed. Then in our public void process, we'll pass in our double and delta. Don't forget to add in override for your ready and process method, as these will tell it to actually use these methods instead of the process on the base class as well. So now inside of our process, we are just going to say if within attack range, and our time until attack is less than or equal to 0, we are going to call a function called attack. We'll then say else and say time until attack is minus equal to delta. Now let's create a public void called attack. And in here, we're going to just debug.print attack player. We also need to cast this to a float, since this is also a float, just to make sure it uses the right we then want to set up two new voids or functions, methods, which we're going to call on attack range body enter. And we're going to pass in we're then going to call a dynamic body here, and in here we're going to say if body dot is in group, and we are going to pass in the player group. We then want to copy this function and just put on body exit. We're going to say if the body is the player, then we're going to set within attack range equal to false, and time until attack is going to be equal to our attack speed again. Now we need to copy this function because we're going to use a signal to connect it. So back in here on our attack range node and signals, we're going to go body. We're going to go body entered and connect it to, and we're going to pass in the on attack range body name to our enemy here. We're then going to change this to a node 2D, as this is what will be passed through in our thing here. We also need to get the exit function, go back to Godot and go to on body exit here, connect it again to our enemy, give it the same method name there and hit connect. Just to make sure this is working, we're going to hit print, debug.print, and I'm just going to check we enter the attack range by saying player in range. And then we're going to go back to main and we're going to drop an enemy into the scene just so we can test this. So let's hit play, make this not full screen for the moment, and also bring this down so we can see the console. And then when I go into this, we should get a message fired in the console. Don't forget to go to your player script and actually add in the player group as well, so we can see this working in here. Save that, hit play, and let's see if we can get this to work now. And you can see now the player is in range, we're getting the attack player call here. However, it seems to be calling way too fast, so let's actually see what the issue is there. So once we call our attack, we're never resetting our time until attack. We need to set our time until attack back to attack speed every time we attack, so it then resets the counter. Now, the next issue we need to face is how we get a reference to our player. Now, one way to do it is by getting the root node and searching for a node called player. So let's try that. So in our player, we want to set player equal to get tree dot root dot get node and search for the player. And make sure you cast it as a player, otherwise you'll get an error saying you can't convert nodes to player. Then what we'll do is just debug.print player.name to see if it actually appears in our search. Also, I'm going to go to project settings, and I'm going to go to our window, and I'm going to switch this from being maximized back to minimized, back to windowed, and actually set it to 720, just so we can actually see the console once we start. So to actually get this to find our player, we also need to give it the main game root, the main game scene to our path here. So by doing get tree.root.getNode main game get node player, this will get us a reference to our player. We then want to actually get our enemy moving towards our player, and to do so we want to create a public override void called physics process. For some reason it missed the P there. And then we will just say if player is not equal to null, inside of braces there, we're then going to say look at, and we're going to pass in our player.global position. We're then going to get a vector to direction, which is going to be equal to our player.global position minus our current global position dot normalized. We will then set our velocity equal to our direction times by our speed. And if we do not have a player, we're going to set our velocity equal to vector2.0. We can then call move and slide down in our physics process at the bottom to actually get the enemy to move towards our player. So now if we hit play, this should allow the enemy to start following. As you can see, he will follow us and we can stop him with a bullet, but he's going to keep trying to get us. And then once he gets in range, he's going to try to attack the player. Now guys, that's going to be it for this video. It's super simple of just setting up an enemy script. In the next lesson, we are just going to set up our enemy and player health scripts so we can actually take damage inside of our attacks here. And obviously when we shoot the bullet, we also want it to do damage to the enemy, so we're going to set up the health system and the attacking in the next video. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, smash that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.